to the very first episode of the Genuinely Care About You podcast. I am your host, I suppose, Christina Wilcox, known on the internet as @Christina S. Wilcox. You probably know me from posting about the Enneagram, mental health related things, and I'm so honored that you wanted to continue this journey with me by listening to this podcast. It's been in the making for quite some time, and I finally kind of, not impulsively, but sort of impulsively, took the jump to do it because I knew that if I didn't just send that email, plan that, like if I just didn't go for it, I was never going to start it, never going to do it. So here we are. And I'm so, again, grateful that you are sticking around for it. And hopefully you will be an active listener and participant. You can follow the podcast on Instagram @GenuinelyCareAboutYou to be involved in the episodes, to help me pick what themes and topics I talk about, what guests I invite, because though I will do a lot of solo episodes, I really wanted this to be a space where I could include people in my real life and people, my friends online too, include them. And yeah, I am super excited, and I thought I would kind of start this podcast episode with what Genuinely Care About You is about, what direction I want to take this podcast, maybe a little background on me, and then I want to talk about 2022 and moving into 2023 and talk about what I learned in 2022, my top books, music, just kind of some fun things, and then kind of some vision casting, some vision casting for 2023. And then I'm going to end the episode with a mini Q&A from questions that were asked on the Genuinely Care About You Instagram page. So, what is Genuinely Care About You? Where did this come from? I have wanted to start a podcast for a really long time. I am quite the chatty person in real life, though I'm relatively introverted. I love talking, especially when it's about something I care about. And that's kind of the whole foundation of this podcast. I am someone who cares a lot and cares very deeply, and have been told sometimes I care too much. And that has always held a negative weight in my life, and it's like contributed to a very negative narrative about what it means to be emotional, to be creative, to be connective. Caring too much has become, or it became something in my life that I was ashamed of and felt like I needed to hide from people. Where now, over the last few years, I've seen that I've been blessed with a lot of care. I don't know how else to put that, but like that caring can do people a lot of good. And sometimes it takes someone caring to speak up about something that's important, to have a much needed conversation. And that's kind of where the name comes from. It also is a little bit of a nod to my favorite movie of all time, You've Got Mail. There is a scene, if you've seen it, you know, where Kathleen Kelly is sick, and Tom Hanks, his character Joe Fox, comes over and is trying to make amends to her after this whole thing that went down in the movie. And he tells her, you know, this wasn't personal, it was just business. And she has this really amazing line where she talks about, just because it wasn't personal to you doesn't mean it's not personal to me or to a lot of people. And what is the matter with being personal anyway? And I have always really resonated with that. And again, I feel like it matches this theme of caring a lot and genuinely caring. So in the podcast art too, you can see that there's a lot of like daisies, and that also is a little bit of a nod to You've Got Mail. Shout out to Blair for the podcast art. It is literally better than anything I have ever hoped for. It is stunning. She captured my vision perfectly. And if you look in that podcast art, there's a lot of mini nods to You've Got Mail. So that's kind of where the name comes from. And as far as starting a podcast, like I said, I really love to chat and to talk, but I wanted a space to expand on what I cover on my Instagram page, which I post a lot about the Enneagram, and I primarily focus on the Enneagram on my Instagram page. But there's a lot that I started to want to share with you guys, and that you guys wanted to share with me, that felt like it couldn't fit on my page. It just like, it never felt right, I guess. And that's because it needed the topics and the discussions and even the thoughts needed time and intention behind it. And so that is why I started this podcast, to have a space to, yes, talk about the Enneagram, but talk about all of the other things that have kind of come out of this journey I've had online of mental health and religious trauma and what it means to reconcile faith and mental health and just psychology in general, OCD, ADHD, just so many different topics that have come up, creativity, identity, just all of these things that I want a space to just kind of process with you guys, and maybe even provide some education with the guests that I have on this podcast. And yeah, a quick little background as well on me. Hi. Again, I'm Christina Wilcox. I am 25 years old. My partner and I, Noah, have been, in 2023, we will have been married 5 years, which is insane. If you're doing your math, you are correct. We were children when we got married. Very young, but it has been the best decision of our lives. We now live in Colorado, in the Denver area. We have a little puppy who in February is going to turn 1 year old, which is amazing. I love him so much. His name is Moose. I work in marketing. Like, outside of all of the passion projects I've done, I do work a 9-to-5, and I have worked 9-to-5s in marketing, social media, blog writing, all of that stuff, strategy. It's very interesting. I feel like I have a double life in that sense sometimes. But yeah, I do that for work because I don't get paid doing this, guys. I also wrote a book. I'm an author. My first book was published in 2020. It's called Take Care of Your Type, an Enneagram Guide to Self-Care. And that was the craziest roller coaster of my life. And I may or may not have a second book project coming up. Teehee. And I guess I'll talk about some of my interests as a person. I love music. I love community and friendship and video games and making things. Like, whether that's a song, whether that's like, I'm not necessarily a crafty person. I attempt to be, but I'm not naturally crafty. But I do love to try and make things. I love Yoga with Adriene. I am an avid Yoga with Adriene video watcher and participant in her, I guess, I don't know if it's a program. I just do Yoga with Adriene on YouTube. I also love YouTube. I am a YouTube stan, I guess. I watch a lot of YouTube. Yeah, that is a little bit about me. And from all of that, I'm sure you've gathered a little bit maybe what this podcast will be about. One, I want it to feel very organic and natural, and I want it to be a little bit scattered sometimes. On Instagram, I've felt very confined in a box and in a niche. And, you know, in some cases, that is like for the good of my quote unquote business that I don't really make money off of on there. But it's good for like my brand and my image to focus on like one thing. And this podcast is something that I want to be very specific, but also general at the same time. I think how I am envisioning it is this is like a mental health podcast. That is the overall blanket umbrella of what this podcast is. Underneath that umbrella fits in mental illness and destigmatization of mental illnesses, faith, and what that looks like for me and for other Christians who struggle with mental health or mental illness. I would love to provide education about religious trauma and developmental disorders. Like there's a lot of more, those things aren't nerdy, but I guess they're more head-y vocabulary. I apparently have a very good one, but I want to talk about psychology, I guess is the best way to put it. And with psychology, obviously, comes pop psychology and the Enneagram and personality. And that is something that I do want to discuss on the podcast as well. I also just want to talk about fun, creative things, stuff that I like. And yeah, those are under the blanket of mental health lies all of the things that I just said. And I want to close, I guess, the podcast theme introduction with what this podcast is not. Because if I've learned anything from being on the internet for almost, I guess, 4 years now, almost 4 years, it'll be 4 years in February, with some type of platform, is that having boundaries and ground rules and just being transparent is very important. And so I want to be upfront and talk about what this podcast is not really quick. One, this podcast is not me claiming to be an expert about anything. It is going to be very opinionated. I want to, obviously, when I'm doing something or talking about something educational, be objective and fact-based and bring on experts to talk about things that I am not an expert in. But I really want this to be a place where I can express myself honestly. And so it'll be a little bit more opinionated, and I want to learn as I go. And having an opinionated podcast doesn't mean it has to be a problematic podcast. You know what I mean? Because sometimes my opinions are going to be about music or a book or an experience I went through. I guess a softer way to say opinionated is this podcast is going to be very story-based, especially when it's just me. Story-based in what I've lived through, what people I know have lived through, and kind of speaking off of that, as opposed to always being black and white and objective. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this podcast is not exclusive. I mentioned that I will be talking about faith and religious trauma and Christianity in some of the episodes on this podcast, and that can be naturally a very exclusive topic, I guess, for a lot of people, which I want to acknowledge that. And I want to approach the topics or the discussions I do about faith in a very approachable way. I want to not use any language that doesn't make sense or isn't easy to indulge in for the everyman, because I also prefer that language. Even as someone who is a Christian, I prefer very straightforward and not cultish language, for lack of better word. But it is not exclusive. I think that's something that's very important to me. I think with a lot, because of what evangelical westernized Christianity is, especially online, how it portrays itself as something that is very me being a Christian automatically means this is everything that I believe. And I don't think that it's that simple. And I just want to say that out loud and acknowledge that it may be naturally an exclusive topic, but don't want it to be exclusive. I want to have very open conversations, and I'm not evangelizing, I guess. It's just going to be me honestly talking about a lot of critique I have from my own religious trauma and experiences, and what it looks like to be a person of faith still after experiencing a lot of things that were harmful and wrong. That was a little bit of a tangent, but I hope that gives you a glimpse of what I mean when I say I don't want this podcast to be exclusive. And with that, this is also not a theology podcast. I think it'd be interesting to bring on some people I really admire in terms of theology and what they believe within Christianity. But for the most part, this is not a theology-based podcast, so don't expect that from me. I'm not a theologian. I am not in seminary. I'm not an expert. Again, not an expert. This also isn't going to be an Enneagram podcast, though I will talk about the Enneagram. Every episode isn't going to be about the Enneagram. Yes, so those are all of my rambly things that I wanted to discuss up front about what this podcast is not. Again, hopefully helping you also understand, I guess, what you're getting into by listening to this podcast, and I hope that it's something you're still interested in listening to. Oh my word, wow. I was sitting in a way that was not good for my elbow just now. Oh my word. Wow. Okay, I'm going to take a sip of tea. I feel like I'm finally loosening up. I have a tendency to, and we all do this, I think, but I have a tendency to mask when I first do things, and I get very, I guess, professional, but not, I just feel when you meet someone for the first time and you give them a watered down version of yourself, I feel like I do that a little bit, and then I can loosen up and breathe. And I feel like now that I've gotten all of that out of the way, we can continue and begin forming our little friendship, I don't know. Have some tea. I hope you have tea or something as well beside you. The tea that I'm drinking is interesting because I think that it's raspberry, but it was in a tea. I have a tea box, and I think it was in one of the sections of the box with a bunch of other things. So it kind of just tastes like raspberry, autumn, cozy peppermint splash of everything. And to be honest, it's pretty good. So the point of this actual episode was to talk about 2022 a little bit and moving into 2023, just me as a person, what I learned, some books I liked, some music I liked, and my hopes for the new year, because I thought that is a very fun and general thing that we can talk about together. So 2022, when I reflect on it, was kind of my sad and distressed girl era, if we're speaking in an online way. I did not have the best year. I really didn't. Everything happened and nothing happened at the same time. I had so many intense, life-altering things happen while being in a job, working from home, and being in the same room every single day all year. So that's what I mean. It's everything was happening around me, but also nothing in my direct environment, so to speak, I guess, was changing until the very end of the year. Whoa. I almost spilt my tea. So I'm coming out of 2022 rather scathed and raw and emo. There was just so much that happened this year. And I think also everything from the past 2 years, both positive and negative, kind of made itself known in my body, if that makes sense. I felt the physical consequences of the stress from everything the past 2 years, whether it was from something good, like my book releasing, or just the obvious stress of the last 2 years that everybody has dealt with. And I think, 2022, I think, was a very necessary year. And that's the worst part of it, is I wish I could just be meh, 2022 is awful. I wish it never happened to me. But I know that it needed to happen to me. It's just not enjoyable. But we're out. We're out of it. And I am one of those people that likes to pretend that all of my problems are gone in the new year. I'm attempting to be that way, which I probably need to stop doing that. But that is a discussion for another time. Okay, so my top 5 books of 2022. This is just going to be a quick little roundup. My top 5 books of the year. My goal was to read 24 books, I believe. I read 21 books last year. I wanted to read 24. I think I only ended up reading 18 or 19, which is still a lot for me personally and how much I read. But my top 5 books, in no particular order: The Stationery Shop, 5 out of 5 stars. It is a historical fiction. You follow a romance. And it, you follow a romance, but it's not a romance book. This is the book I started 2022 with, and it is the book that I've thought about almost every single day the entire year because I loved it so much. I think I might reread it this year because of how much I enjoyed it. Nothing else has compared. I'm currently in the middle of another historical fiction where you follow a romance, but it's not the center of the story. And nothing compares to this book. I don't know. I know people talk about it, but I also don't understand why it's not huge. I don't know. I just absolutely loved it. It was my top, again, in my top 5 reads of the year. I think one of my all-time forever favorites. The next book that also was mind-blowing to me, and I know literally everyone has talked about it already, but I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. 5 out of 5 stars. I have talked to so many people about this book in real life. It came into my life at a time where I actually needed it. Like, I needed how she spoke about OCD, and I needed how she spoke about trauma. And this book, it truly, look up content warnings. There's some chapters where she speaks very graphically about what she goes through. She really struggles with an eating disorder. Struggles even seems like a very watered down version of what she dealt with. But a lot of it is very graphic. There's just a lot of graphic stuff, and the way she writes it is very, like, you're in it. She pulls you in, and you're kind of like, at every age in this book, you're experiencing what she experienced at that age, like in the tone of voice that the age was, if that makes sense. And yeah, look up content warnings. I had to pause a couple of times because it was a lot. But definitely one of my top reads of the year. Definitely one of the top reads for everyone this year. And it truly deserves the hype. And if you can listen to the audiobook, I think that gives it a whole other level of depth because you hear her voice telling the story. I don't know. It just was amazing. Amazing. Next, on a more lighthearted, wholesome note, The House of the Cerulean Sea was also one of my top reads this year. It is a fantasy book about a man who goes to an orphanage for like magical creatures in this world, and that is all I'm gonna tell you about it, because I think the less you know about it, the better. In a way, the only thing you need to know about this book is that it feels like a hug. It is so wholesome and cozy and moving. It's very touching. And I guess my qualifiers for my favorite books whenever I read is if it inspires me to write or create something of my own, if I'm thinking about it for a while, if I'm chewing on it for a while, but especially if it makes me create. That's like the criteria I have. And so far, every book I've talked about and all the books I'm mentioning caused me to do that. And House of the Cerulean Sea just has even some quotes that I still think about. I loved it. So cozy. If you are ever by the sea, it's a great book to read by the sea. Like, I wish I would have been by an ocean when I read it. It's just beautiful. Fourth book, a classic, The Picture of Dorian Gray. Wow. An amazing book. So many, again, words and phrases that I will remember and think about forever. But I think the most impactful part of this book for me personally was how it made me feel. Like, if you want to feel so in touch with the twistedness of humanity, which may not sound appealing, but it's like, or I guess not the twistedness, the complexity of humanity and the complexity and layers of what it means to be vain or to have pride. It just made me feel like, it felt like a fog went over my head as I read it. And it kind of made me sad afterward. But again, it wasn't a not enjoyable experience. It just was like, it really made me feel like it brought out emotions that were good for me, I think, to connect to and to look at. I don't know. It's just also so good. It's just so good. And to me, a very approachable classic to read. It doesn't feel like your brain is exploding when you're reading it. Last book that I have, I guess I haven't learned that yet, by Shauna Niequist. Any book Shauna Niequist releases every single year will be on my top 5. I just love her nonfiction writing. It is what made me want to be an author. The way she writes about her life and the way she recalls and reflects on her life and turns it into these like very tangible, workable like forces in my own life. I don't know if that made sense, but like I feel like I can almost like reach in the page and I'm taking something with me every time I read her writing. And this book primarily was about what it's like to be in your 40s, and because that's like her stage of life. And I found it really important to read at like 20, I think I read it when I was 24. And it's just so good. I love Shauna Niequist. I'm a fan, I'm a stan, I'm everything. Will always be. Quick little music note, because I love music. I think besides Taylor Swift, the artist Blue Eyes was my top artist of the year. I listened to her songs on repeat. There was a good chunk of months where I think I only listened to her music. She is amazing. Amazing. Just go listen to her music. It's Blue Eyes, BLU Eyes. So good. Another little music note. I love live music, and I got to see more live music this year, and that made me remember how much I need to see live music to feel good, and to feel connected to God and myself, and just like live music truly fills me like nothing else. And I think with that came this inner movement of reclaiming my love for pop and musical theater, both things I used to be ashamed of. My friend and I were talking about this the other day. Do you remember when like liking pop felt like the most offensive thing you could do? Or at least where like when I was in high school, that's what it felt like, or the people I was around at the time, it felt like liking pop was the worst thing I could possibly do. So it's been fun reclaiming that, and not caring that I love pop. All right. Gonna wrap up this little recap with 2023 hopes. I want to have less intensity in my life this year, and less inflammation in my mind and in my body. I have had quite the health journey this year, mentally and physically, and I would just like less inflammation overall. I don't want to feel like I'm swollen. So that's what I'm working towards. And with that, I think comes less intensity. And by intensity, I just mean like stress. I feel like, or it felt like intense things were just following me all year. And I have done some reflection on maybe why that could be. And I just want less of it this year. I want to really prioritize less intensity and less inflammation. Reconciling my offline person with my online presence, I guess. I have been very online the past few years, and in 2022, I was forced to be offline in a lot of ways, which was amazing. I forged really amazing friendships and felt very connected for the most part to my real life, even to the boring parts of my real life. And I want to reconcile and continue to create boundaries for both, like what it means for me to be offline or online and what I share and what I don't share, but also just, I don't know, feeling like I have an offline life. You know? Yeah. I would love to kick OCD in the booty this year, which I have been doing, but I want to be at the end of 2023 and just not feel the intensity of OCD every single day. I want to feel a lower level of intensity of OCD in my brain, which will take a lot of difficult work, again, that I've been doing and that I'm doing now, but I really, really would love to feel that by the end of the year. I'm looking forward to some very exciting things happening. Noah and I are going to Paris for our 5-year wedding anniversary, which is unbelievable. Something I have always dreamt about doing, but never thought I would be able to do. And I get to do it with my bestie. So that's amazing. And in July, I am seeing Taylor Swift herself in concert with 3 of my best friends. And that feels like it's going to be a core memory. You know what I mean? Because I have never been to a concert that big, and I think that will be the biggest concert I ever go to. So I'm very much looking forward to that. All right, to wrap up the episode, I'm going to answer 1 or 2 questions from the Genuinely Care About You Instagram, because I asked you guys to ask me a question about really whatever you wanted to end the episode. I think I might do this every episode, perhaps. Let's see. What is my word for 2023? My word, I think I have 2 words this year, and my 2 words are savor and make, because I want to savor and feel what it means to savor everything that I have, and just that feeling of gratitude and like present gratitude. And then make, because I want to feel a new and refreshed confidence for making things and sharing them. And I really just want to create and make this year. But make feels more like a word that I would use my hands with, you know what I mean? I don't know. And that's very pleasing to my brain. So my 2 words are savor and make. Last question. What's your go-to snack? I love this. Something light to end. My go-to snack. I love fruit. I love a little bowl of chocolate chips as a snack. I love the chili lime chips from Trader Joe's as a snack. Popcorn. You asked me my go-to snack, and I gave you like 6. I feel like a lot of the time when I crave snacks, I crave something fruity or chocolatey. So yeah, I'll say my primary go-to is like fruit and chocolate. And popcorn. I love popcorn. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to the first episode of Genuinely Care About You. Thanks for coming along on the ride of the introduction and explanation of what this podcast is going to be about, some 2022 reflection into 2023, and just those fun little questions. I can't wait to see you for the next episode, and I hope you have a beautiful start to your year. I would love to hear from you. Please follow me at Christina S. Wilcox or at Genuinely Care About You. specifically the podcast Instagram, just because it's such a smaller space than my other account, and I would love to really connect with you guys. So yeah, stay tuned for some fun things, and this was fun. I feel very relaxed ending this, which is a nice feeling. So yeah, I hope you have a beautiful start to your year, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.